everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Marco Calmasini. I'm from the Backup and Recovery Product Management team. Kelly Smith and Tim Sheehan are also here online, and they're ready to answer questions if you have any on the chat. What we're gonna cover today is a very short overview from my side about the zero data loss recovery appliance protection for the Exadata clouded customer. And after that, we will have Peter Sierra from the MAA Solutions team that will go into more detail on using ZDLRA or zero data loss recovery appliance to protect Exadata clouded customer, and we'll show a demo of how to do that. So really quickly, I just want to do an introduction as usual. Okay, everything that we mentioned here, if it's related to features, product features that are not there yet, it must be taken just as a generic outline, and nothing specific. Overall, the Oracle Backup and Recovery Solutions portfolio is made up of different components. So what do you want to protect usually? If you look at this, on premises, on the bottom slide here, you may have your protected databases and just protected generic data, generic file system. So the basic building block, the foundation of all the protection for the Oracle database is Recovery Manager. It's the recovery engine for the Oracle database. It's part of any Oracle database, and it can be used not only to backup and restore Oracle database. It can be used to export data, duplicate databases, etc. And it can do, if we look at backup and recovery specifically, use disk. So any locally or network mounted file system can be used directly. The Oracle database use ARMAN. You can backup and restore to any destination. ARMAN can also talk directly to the recovery appliance, which is one of the topics we'll cover in more detail later. The recovery appliance is an engineered system built specifically to protect the Oracle database. It has some specific features that I will mention later. If we look and extend behind the on-premises environment and look at cloud, both the recovery appliance and ARMAN directly can send backup to the cloud, for example. So you can use object storage in the cloud through the database backup cloud service, and backup and restore data directly to and from cloud, from on-premises, and also from cloud instances. You can access the object storage layer directly from ARMAN. Archive storage is also available for long-term retention backups for compliance reasons, for example. The other thing that we will focus more later today is Clouded Customer, which is basically an on-premises Exadata system that is consumed, managed, etc., like a cloud service. So the experience is exactly the same. The experience you have when using Exadata cloud services in the public cloud, but the hardware is actually installed on your data center, and we will talk more about that later. Clouded Customer has the ability to back up directly to the recovery appliance, and we will also see a demo of that. All these backups that then stand to the cloud and object storage can be used to instantiate databases in the cloud because they are in native ARMAN format. There is no need to use or install any agent into a cloud instance if you want to restore one of those backups, and there is no need to go back to the on-premises system, like if these backups are coming from the recovery appliance to restore them. It's just ARMAN, and you can point ARMAN to the bucket where the backups are located, and you can restore from there. The other component we have in the family is Oracle Secure Backup, which is a more traditional backup and recovery solution. It's a software that you can install on an admin server, and the admin server will manage the backup environment, and then you have to deploy agents on your different clients, and you can manage your backups and send your backups to tape, to disk, or to the cloud as well. Oracle Secure Backup can backup also file system, whereas the other solution through Harman can only backup the Oracle database. So Oracle Secure Backup can complement your solution, even in a cloud customer environment where you want to backup not only the Oracle database, maybe some other file system of data that you have, right? So this is basically the whole family picture. So if we look at Exadata more specifically, again, that's what we're going to cover. So the Exadata is simply the better platform that you can use to run an Oracle database, right? It's both from a hardware perspective, software perspective, and also from an operational point of view. From a hardware perspective, it's a scale-out solution optimized for the Oracle database. It includes in a single package compute, networking, storage, all optimized to have the fastest performance when running an Oracle database and the lowest cost. The Exadata software that runs on top of it has a lot of specialized features and algorithms, again designed to optimize the way that Oracle runs and to optimize all the different workloads that you can have, all ATP analytics, and whatever type of workload you have is optimized to get the most out of the Oracle databases that you have running on it. From an operational perspective, it's all automated. It has a lot of automation built into it. So all patching, maintenance, performance management, etc., can all be managed, automated in some way. So it's just, as I said, the best possible platform to run the Oracle database. And Exadata can come on different flavors if you want, right, or deployment models. It can be an on-premises traditional solution where you basically purchase the hardware and you manage it yourself, and you install you configure your databases, you maintain them, etc. It can come as a public cloud solution where Exadata systems are actually ran in the public cloud, managed by Oracle, and you use them and consume them as a typical cloud service. The other the third option that you have is Exadata Cloud Customer, which is, as we mentioned before, the same experience you have when using a cloud service, but the Exadata systems are actually installed in your data center. So you use them and you pay for them as a cloud service, but the hardware sits in your data center. The fact that your hardware is in your data center gives Exadata Cloud customers more options in terms of backup, more possibilities compared to what you have when you're running it as a cloud service, where you don't have access to the infrastructure and you don't have access to the Exadata hardware at all. So being in your data center, in addition, going from the bottom up on this slide, going from the backup to the object storage via the database backup cloud service, which obviously this is one of the options that you also have in the cloud. You also have access to your local NFS storage, for example. You have access to Oracle Secure Backup tape destinations, for example, or also disk and cloud if you want. And also you have access to the Zero Data Loss Recovery Appliance, which again gives you the best possible solution to backup and protect your Oracle databases. And again, that's what we'll see in a moment, right? The Zero Data Loss Recovery Appliance is built on the same Exadata platform that we mentioned before, but on top of it runs its own software, the Recovery Appliance software, that again is optimized to protect the Oracle database, and gives it gives some benefits compared to any other backup solution. For example, in terms of recovery assurance, it provides real-time database protection, right? And it provides continuous validation of your data and provides fast virtual full recovery, and we will talk about them in a minute. It provides savings in managing your backups through the efficient use of incremental forever, through the fact that you are offloading all the backup processing to the Recovery Appliance. And this is even more important when you are running a cloud-based service or a cloud-based solution where you pay for what you use, right? So all the CPU power and anything, any resource you're using in the Exadata Cloud Customer in this case, it is paid for through the cloud credits. So in this case, it provides even more savings. And the third aspect is the cloud scalability, right? The recovery appliance can start small with what we call a base rack, and it can scale up to one full rack, which is 1 petabyte of capacity, and then it can scale out up to 18 racks if you want, right? Giving an extremely, almost virtually unlimited capabilities. And the other feature that the recovery appliance provides is a very simple tool for database migration. So if you are in a traditional solution, right, you're running Oracle workloads on platforms like, I don't know, the regular Linux or other, database, other operating systems flavors on-premises, then and you plan to migrate to Exadata Cloud Customer, can introduce the recovery appliance first to start backing up those environments to the recovery appliance, and that will facilitate and accelerate the way you can migrate those workloads to the new Exadata Cloud Customer environment. All these things can be discussed in more detail. So if you want to have more details about this, obviously reach out to us, ask in the chat, etc., and we can discuss that in more details. So how does the recovery appliance provide those benefits that I just mentioned before? So number one, you can have a continuous protection of your Oracle database through real-time redo transport. Every time a change is made on a database, on an Oracle database, that change is sent immediately to the recovery appliance. The updated blocks are sent immediately from the database server memory to the recovery appliance. They don't even have to wait to go through the archive logs and the archive log backup, etc. Actually, you're never backing up archive logs. So you can if you want, but if you enable real-time redo transport, you don't have to back up archive logs anymore, right? The archive logs are created inside the recovery appliance based on these updated blocks that are received continuously from the protected databases. The other important feature is that you are not doing full backups anymore. The first backup you do to the recovery appliance is a full backup, and after that, it's only incremental backup. So on day one, you take a full backup, a complete level 0 backup, that basically will create a baseline for your database backups or your database protection. After that, for the lifetime of your database or subsequent backup will be an incremental. That's why it's going to be incremental forever. So on day 2, only the changes are sent to the recovery appliance, and the recovery appliance will create a new virtual full backup. There is no merge process. There is basically the backup coming into the recovery appliance will be open. The recovery appliance will look at the blocks inside of it, will index, process them, validates, very important, index them, and create those virtual full backup, which is just the kind of set of pointers you can think about it is, where the unchanged blocks still point to the previous version, and the updated blocks point to the new version. And this will keep going forever, basically, right? Based on the recovery window, based on the retention that you want to have, the recovery appliance will purge the blocks that are not needed anymore to free up space for new backups coming in. Those virtual full backups can then be copied to cloud storage, can be replicated to a recovery appliance on a DR site, for example. And they can also be backed up or copied to tape if you want. And the copy to tape does not necessarily have to come from the remote replica, can also come from the primary one. Across all this life cycle, there is a continuous validations. Database blocks are validated when they are sent to the recovery appliance. They are validated continuously as they sit on the recovery plans, and they are also validated when they are copied, for example, to the cloud destination to take or replicated to the remote recovery plans, where if they go to remote recovery plans, they are also validated again. And when I say validated, I just don't mean a check on the SCSI IO block. I mean, it's a real validation of the Oracle database, right? Recovery plans can detect if an Oracle database is, still a valid Oracle database, or if its integrity is somehow compromised. Okay. The way you manage all this is through Enterprise Manager, right? And in Enterprise Manager, you can see things like monitor your unprotected data window, for example. This is a very specific thing that no other backup solution can do. You can verify, like you see in this red square here, what the unprotected data window is, basically what the risk of losing data is if we were to restore your database at this time. And you can see here you have some databases where the real-time redo is enabled, right? What I was saying before, when blocks are sent immediately from the database to the recovery plans. And you see your unprotected data window is less than 1 second, right? You can basically go up to the last second if you want to restore in case you have disaster and you lose your database. If you don't enable real-time to transport, obviously this basically represents the last time you back it up in archive log. Okay, and you can set alerts on this. So Enterprise Manager can alert you and send an email if for example, your database protection is exceeding a threshold that you set. You can see here, 24 hours can be anytime you want. So if anything is putting you at risk, you can go and check what the situation is and obviously correct it. So going back specifically to Exadata Cloud Customer, again, the fact that this solution is on your data center gives you the ability to connect directly to other recovery plans. You can use up to 100 gigabit throughput through 425 gigabit Ethernet links that connects directly the recovery plans to your Exadata Cloud Customer. And you can take advantage of all these features on your Exadata Cloud Customer databases. You can enable incremental forever. You can have zero-day loss recoverability, continuous validation. Your backup solution can basically scale in an almost unlimited way. And you can also offload the backups for longer retention to cloud or tape that can be connected behind the recovery plans. And this would be totally transparent to the protected database. It means that you can set policies, for example, where you say, I want to keep my backups locally in the recovery plans for 1 week, and then I want to ship them over to the cloud object storage where they will be retained for, I don't know, 3 months, for example, or whatever years, whatever you want to choose, right? And the recovery appliance will manage these, and this will be totally transparent to the protected database. It means that if you try to do a restore from a protected database through the recovery appliance of a backup that is not any longer locally stored on the recovery appliance because it's now only in the cloud, the recovery appliance will get it from the cloud where it resides and stream it back to the protected database in a totally transparent way. So your restore can, still remain, for example, happening through the console and not the cloud console, right? And not worrying about where the backup actually is. The backups stored in the cloud are all encrypted for security, and the recovery plans will manage that encryption. Obviously, you can also go to tape if you want. That's another alternative. You can put a tape library behind the recovery plans, keep everything on premises, and store this longer-term retention backup on tape. And at the end, it will work the same way. Okay, you don't have to worry about where the backup is. And you can obviously have both things if you want. So this was pretty much it from my introduction, and I'm going to now stop sharing and handing it over to Peter Sierra for the MAA team. That will go into more details on how you configure and how the integration between Exadata Cloud Customer and ZDLRA works, and will also give us a demo. If you have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. Maybe some of them have already been answered. I'll take a look now. And we can also come back later for a live Q&A if you want. So I think I'm going to stop sharing, and yeah, Peter, you can take it from here.
as Marco indicated, I'm going to talk about and demo the recovery appliance as a backup destination for the ExaCC platform. In the ExaCC Gen 2 platform, we support multiple backup locations through the UI. I'm listing those here. The first one, which we're going to demo, is the recovery appliance as a backup resource. The next backup destination that we support is NFS. And the third is the object store in the cloud. So if you would like to back up your database to the object store, we support that. And then finally, we also support backing up to the FRA, which we call local. So there are the 4 options that are available. 2 of these are considered backup resources in terms of some additional configuration information is needed by the cloud administrator when configuring the backup for these locations. For local, that would have to be done when you create the VM cluster. You have to indicate that you would want the disk groups to be split in a fashion that would allow you to back up to the FRA at that point. There's a 60-40 split, and if you're also including snapshots, that percentages gets a little different. Okay, and the object store is always available and in the drop-down list. Okay, so what is the workflow for the recovery appliance as a backup destination when you're looking at the UI in the ExaCC space? So the standard RA administrative tasks are still present. They do not change. So the RA administrator would have to do the standard task, which is create a protection policy, which defines the recovery window, create a VPC user and a VPC password for that user. And then at the time that a specific database it will be configured or constructed in the UI, the administrator is required to add that DB unique name to the protection policy and then grant the VPC user access to that database so it can back up to that DB unique name. Okay, so that's done. The first step is done by the administrator. The second step is what we'll also demo is the cloud administrator's part, which is to create a backup destination, which is an RA backup resource through the UI. And the information that is provided at that point, and this resource is a resource that is in the compartment and it's outside of the particular Exadata infrastructure and the databases, so this resource can be used for different Exadata infrastructures within the same compartment. So the items that need to be provided by the cloud administrator are the connection string to the RA and the VPC user. At the time, the details are just the VPC user at this point. So that creates a backup destination of a resource for the RA. And then the third step is when a database is created or post-database creation, you can associate that database to that RA backup resource location. And again, that can be done when you're creating the database through the UI, or if you decide to postpone, say you're not sure where you want this database to back up, you can then come back to that database and select one of the options, and one of those being the RA if it's configured as a backup location. And at that point, you would select the backup resource and provide the VPC password. Okay, so what happens during backup configuration for a database in ExaCC when this event occurs? So you've gone through the step of associating this backup with an RA backup resource. So there's, we're doing all the heavy lifting through the tooling and through the UI to make sure that everything is correctly configured for that particular database. And that, is using the libra.so. The RMAN will use an incremental forever policy or backup script, and the initial level 0 will be taken immediately after the backup configuration is done. And then archive logs are also backed up, and they're backed up every 30 minutes. And these two are driven by a cron tab entry that's dropped in on the system, and that will run, based on a schedule. For the daily backups, which are the incremental forever, they would get randomly scheduled. Initially, a time is picked between 12 midnight and 6 in the morning, and then that is what's placed in the cron tab. If you need a little more control over when that starts, you can go in through the backup API or the backup configuration and change that setting at a later point in time, but that cannot be done through the UI today. So, and then the backup of the archive logs, as I indicated, is every 30 minutes. So what happens is in terms of configuration for RMAN, well, RMAN, we're going to lay down all the MAA best practices that we are, publishing in our papers for the RA against a regular Exadata on-prem database, and they include like section size of 64 GB, files per set 1, and the number of channels. So all the necessary client configuration occurs, including setting up the wallet for the VPC user, making sure that the SQLnet.org is pointing to the right locations for the encryption wallet, and for the wallet location, and so on. So all that is done automatically by the system, and it's taken care of. And then once that configuration is complete and the level 0 is taken, then every day a level one would occur, which is an incremental forever, and that will occur specifically at the time of the cron tab every day. Okay, let me just stop sharing and switch to the demo itself. So for backup destinations, I want to start with this backup resource. And so this is an Exadata cloud machine that we have in our lab that we use for testing. So I'm going to demo the information that we described earlier on this system. You can see here that we have two types of resources, which I talked about earlier. One is the recovery appliance, and the other one is NFS. So we're going to focus on the recovery appliance today. So I'm just going to sort those by recovery appliance. So I have 3 different RAs, recovery appliance in our lab, and I've got these described here as backup resources. So what does it look like to create a backup resource for the RA? So there's a button, and so this, okay. So there is this location over here, which is the backup destination. So this link here, it brings you to this location in the UI, okay? And so if we click Create Backup Destination, you will see that there are 2 options here, one for the recovery appliance, one for NFS storage. So if we're focused on the recovery appliance, I'm within my compartment. I would give it a user name. I can change this name to anything that I want at that point. So
that's the system name, not the user name.
So this backup destination is just a user-friendly backup destination that describes it in the UI itself. So you can name this destination whatever you want. Okay, and I typically use the recovery appliance name in the backup destination name here, just so to distinguish it from others, as you can see that I've done already. So what information, other bits of information need to be provided here? It's the recovery appliance connection string. And there's a little pop-up here under the eye that gives you information about that string, but that is this little bit of information, which is the recovery appliance connection string, and this is how RMAN connects to the catalog and also connects to the recovery appliance to do its backups. And then the next bit of piece of information is the VPC user. I would just type in something here normally, just because I've typed in entries, or just the browser is caching these so they're available. This is not a drop-down list that the UI is giving me, right? So I type in my VPC username, and then I just hit create backup destination, right? It's a very simple operation. That'll occur immediately, and then you will see that there's associated databases listed for this particular backup destination. And since I just created this backup destination, there was no databases associated with this particular location. But if we went back to to, let's say, RA Boston, you can see that this resource, this backup resource location, is already associated with multiple databases, and they are listed here. One of the nice things is if I wanted to, see everything that is backing up to this particular resource, I can do this, and then I can then select this database, and then that'll drive me to this particular database in the system where this is occurring. And as you can see with this particular database, since it's been configured and I've been backing up for some time, the information here, the backup destination shows that it's a recovery appliance. The backup destination is Boston. Now, if I click on this link, I will go back to where I was before, and that automatic backups are enabled. And automatic backups means that the daily level 1 is occurring for this particular database. And you can see I have backups listed here. The recovery window on this particular database is small, so it's only keeping, I think, like 10 days worth of information. And then the type is virtual full, the status is that it's active, and that these database backups are good. You'll see the start time and the end time here listed. And then also, again, these are UTC time. The UI always lists most of its information in UTC time, so it's important to note that your backup, your VM may be created in a different time zone, and this VM is actually under the Pacific time zone. So that's, the UI basically is always going to reflect times in UTC. Okay, so let me just display this information here. So there, let me go back to cluster. Okay, so I just wanted to highlight that this VM cluster, which has these databases associated with it, and one of those was the database that I just looked at, that time zone here is in Pacific time, right? And you can see that for this particular VM, I do not have local backups. I have not configured the disk groups to use to do the split, so I don't have the ability to do local backups at that point, okay? So as I said earlier, there's two areas where you can associate a database with the RA backup location, right? So number one is when I create a database. So if I click the create database option here, I get the ability to see the information that I need to create the database, right? I have to fill this information in. And one of the important pieces of information is the DB unique name, which the administrator of the RA would already have added to that part on the back end for his role in this handshake. So that database needs to be added already on the back end of the RA. And then I get to choose my database version and the PDB name if I want to. But you will see down here in this area where there is configure backups, I have an option of selecting the type of backup I want to do. So I would go to the recovery appliance, right? And then from there, I get a choice of the recovery appliance backup destinations that I've already configured for this system. And I can change the compartment if those backup destinations are in a different compartment within this tenancy, right? So let's say I will pick RA Boston. I will then, this is a drop down where I'm selecting the VPC user that is associated, that I've already added. And then my responsibility at this point is to type in the VPC user password, and then I would want to enable automatic backups. And by enabling automatic backups, I'm getting the daily level, the daily job occurring for this particular database. And for RA, that would be an incremental level 1 forever at that point. For other backup destination, it would be a weekly level 0 and then a level 1 during the week that would occur. So that's a slightly different, process for those other backup destinations when the level 0 occurs. Okay, so at that point I can create the database. I'm not going to do that here, but I can create the database. The database would then be, would be created by the UI. Would call the back end. The back end would then create the database. After the database is created, the next step in that workflow would be to create this backup location association for that database. If for some reason something occurred as part of that backup configuration, say I incorrectly typed in the password, the backup configuration would fail because some information was not provided correctly, and that would show up as a little icon next to the database here on this list. And what would happen is I could go, it would not impact the database creation itself. The database would be created correctly, but there would be a little icon to indicate that the backup destination may have failed at that point. Okay, and then you could go back in and then enable backup again at a later point in time. So we'll do that enabling after the fact, after database creation. So I have a database, I have two databases here that are backing up to the RA. I mean, one database that's backing up to the RA, one database that's backing up to the object store. And this particular database here is not backing up to any location. You can see that I've not configured this database to back up to a particular backup destination. So it will show as none in the UI. Automatic backups would be disabled, and the backup retention period would be 0, right? So if we compare that to this particular database, which is backing up to the recovery appliance, again, you'll see that it's enabled and so on, right? We don't list the backup retention window here because that retention window is controlled by the recovery appliance through the protection policy. So that information is not listed here. So let me just go back again. So how does the workflow look if a database has not been configured for a particular backup destination? And how do I enable or associate after the fact post-database creation? There is an edit backup setting button here. So if I click on that button, I will get an option and a window will pop up that allows me to choose, again, the backup destination that I want to configure this database for. Again, I will get the list of options that are available for this backup for this database. So the recovery appliance again. I will see the same type of information as I did when I was creating it, when I was associating it during creation time. So I would select RA Boston, my VPC user, and I would enable backups. And then again, you can see the backup retention period indicates that it's controlled by the protection policy of the RA itself, okay? So that would basically, configure this database, and that would submit the job, and this database then would turn from available to updating, meaning that there was some operation or workflow that would occur, and there would be a work request that would show up here that would basically give the information that there is some particular operation occurring, and that work request would be associated with that backup destination occurring. Once the backup destination configuration is complete, the database goes back to green, and then at that point backups will start occurring as I indicated. Okay, so what are the other, going back to the database that has backups for the RA already, the other side of the coin is restoring the database. So what are the options through the UI to restore a particular backup for a database that's been backing up for a period of time or just started? The one thing that I do want to indicate here is that the databases, flashback database is enabled for these databases by default through the tooling. So if the recovery or the restore operation is capable and flashback database can be used because it meets the requirements at that point when the restore is submitted to the back end, flashback database will be used, and that's a very fast operation versus using RMAN at that point. So we do support that, and that's configured as part of the backup. The database configuration is done by default for ExaCC for that option. So what options do I get for restoring a database? I get 3 options. So the first one is restore to latest. Basically, we will do a recover restore database and recover database commands in that RMAN syntax, and we're trying to get to the latest point in time, your latest transaction, and recover the database to the latest point in time as much as possible at that point, right? The other two are more around being a point in time recovery, so you have the ability to restore to a timestamp or restore to an SCN. So if you restore to a timestamp, there's a little calendar button here, which may not be obvious, but if you click on that, you'll get a little calendar, and you can select a specific, day. And again, these times are in UTC, so you have to be aware that your database time zone it will be different, right? If it is not UTC. So in my case, if I'm Pacific, I have to do this, add and come to the right UTC time that I want at that point. So I select that option, and then I would hit this button here, which is restore database, and that job would be submitted, and the restore would happen, and the recovery would happen automatically in the back end, and then that database would go from available to updating, and then it would become available again at that point. Right? So the other option is restored SCN, and you have an option of entering in an SCN. These SCN numbers are here because I entered them before through the browser, and they're just cached in my system. But you would have to locate your SCN that you're interested in beforehand, and then type that number in at that point. So they're really the main options for the UI is regarding. It's a very simplistic model. It's very straightforward. You get to create a backup destination for the recovery appliance. Automatic backups will occur daily for that backup location and for that particular database, and then you can then associate then you can restore a database using these options. So the other item that I would like to mention is zero data loss. So real-time redo transport is not currently an option to enable through the UI, but we're hoping to make that available in the near future. But that can be done through the back end, and that could be configured by the customer without any impact on this configuration. So if that operation can be done, and that's just following the documentation that the recovery appliance has. The other item that I would like to mention is that during backups, as Marco mentioned, there's multiple in this VM nodes in this VM cluster. This is a half rack, so there's 4 nodes. All the nodes would participate in the backup of a database. So we will spread the channels across all the nodes in the system, and we would be able to leverage the bandwidth of that backup network, or the 25 gig that's sitting in each of the VM nodes at that point of the backup time. So that's very important. So we're trying to make sure we distribute and get as much throughput for these backups that the recovery appliance can handle. And typically, a 2-node system can do very well in terms of throughput for the recovery appliance. So I think, Marco, that's the extent of my demo that I like to share.
Okay, thank you, Peter. It was very, very informative. I think we can open it up to live Q&A if anyone wants to speak up and ask questions directly. There were a few questions on the Q&A chat that were answered. Some of them probably require some discussion around what's in roadmap and what's coming, etc. Tim, do you want to take this part and give an update on the roadmap things that may address some of the questions that were on the chat?
Yeah, sure. Let me just talk about Recovery Appliance and cloud service. So Recovery Appliance is an on-prem engineered systems today. We are looking at offerings in the cloud. So we're looking at providing a public cloud service that has the features and value benefits that Marco mentioned. As a public cloud service, that'll be available for database cloud services, ExaCS, DBCS, autonomous database, and also on-prem databases use, including ExaCC and on-prem recovery appliances. So we have a roadmap to deliver these, and as we get closer, we'll share more updates there. And the other question, I think, was about a backup, taking a backup to cloud directly from the database and also taking backups to ZDLRA. We recommend actually doing this from the ZDLRA, so you can configure a cloud destination on Recovery Appliance where it will copy backups at whatever frequency or backup type that you want. We are looking at a capability to be able to create a self-contained recoverable backup set. We call an ARM and a keep backup that you could copy off to cloud. So that will be coming in the roadmap today. You can copy just your normal fulls and incrementals and archive logs for operational recovery from the cloud. You can do that from RA today.
All right, thank you. I just brought up the deployment model slide that we use for Exadata Cloud Customer, right? So this is what is available for the Exadata systems today. The ZDLRA today is only available on the on-premises model, which is the first one on the left. And the plan, as Tim mentioned, is to expand to the other cloud models that you see on the right, the public cloud and the cloud customer in the future. So this is where we are heading to. I think we are almost done, unless there is anyone that wants to speak up and ask anything. Otherwise, yeah, feel free to reach out. The AskTOM website has the ability to enter questions directly there. So if you want to, you can do that. And we will take care of it. All right, so I think there are no more questions. So thank you everyone for joining, and yeah, we are closing this session. Thank you everyone, have a good day.